This is Epic Book Recaps, a podcast that offers complimentary audio summaries of influential nonfiction books, making learning a smarter experience. All That She Carried by Tiya Miles. A Legacy of Love. In the years following the abolition of slavery, a resilient African-American woman named Ruth Middleton toiled in South Carolina, like many of her contemporaries. They worked strenuously for meager wages and endured numerous injustices. During this era, African Americans yearned for a better life beyond the harsh Southern conditions. Many, including Ruth, migrated north, seeking safety and greater opportunities. Upon reaching Philadelphia, Ruth carried with her a small bag decorated with inscriptions, believed to be a gift from her great-grandmother Rose. Rose had given it to her daughter, Ashley, when they faced the imminent threat of being sold and separated. Always seek creative avenues to keep the connections with your loved ones alive, even amidst challenging situations. This story delves into the intimate lives of those ensnared by the transatlantic slave trade, focusing on the bag passed down through generations to Ruth. You will learn about their struggles and how they fostered familial ties and connections despite facing severe hardships. Let's dive in. Hidden Biography. Ruth's great-grandmother, Rose, endured a life of slavery in Charleston, South Carolina, a time and place where existence was unfathomably harsh, especially for individuals like her. Charleston glittered with wealth, a facade built on the exploited labor of the enslaved. Wealth and beauty built on the toil and suffering of others foster injustice and moral harm. Rose's existence revolved around the Martins, a wealthy Charleston family who made their fortune through slave trading. This meant that Rose was bound to their whims without any say in her life. Records about Rose's life are sparse. She was listed as a property with a price tag by her enslavers. They left no account of her life aspirations or her fears. But we can surmise that her days were filled with grueling work under the constant scrutiny of her owners. The Martins perceived themselves as benign and paternal figures, but they were far from it. They dominated every facet of Rose's life, often resorting to threats and oppression. Rose navigated her life of ceaseless hardship, taking comfort in the strong bonds of community among the enslaved. They shared stories, songs, and dreams of freedom covertly, under the veil of night. Despite the oppressive surveillance, Rose and her peers nurtured a culture of resistance, preserving African traditions and illicitly teaching their children to read and write. Details about Rose's life are buried in history, but historians continue to probe into her journey's end and the challenges she encountered. Nevertheless, Rose was extraordinary. Despite losing everything, she held tightly to what mattered most, her love for her daughter Ashley. The cruel slave trade. Like any mother, Rose's love for Ashley was boundless, and they found comfort in each other's company. However, Rose's life took a turn when her owner, Robert Martin, passed away. Often the death of an owner triggered the selling of their slaves. Rose dreaded that this would mean a painful separation from Ashley. She had witnessed numerous families being torn apart and was well aware of the trauma it inflicted. The most significant threat that slaves faced was being torn apart from their families. Tilda Barbara Christian. Tiya Miles. Rose's life with Ashley would have been filled with small moments of joy. She would have nurtured Ashley, imparting life lessons, sharing stories, showing her love every day and watching her grow. But an impending tragedy loomed over them. Rose sensed it and realized that she was powerless to prevent it. She chose to make a special sack for Ashley, a symbol of her love and heritage, to offer comfort if they were ever forced to separate. Rose painstakingly selected items for the bag. She included a worn-out dress, a practical item for Ashley. She also added pecans, a valuable source of nutrition for Ashley in times of need. Most importantly, she cut a lock of her hair and placed it in the bag as a personal token of comfort and a reminder of her mother's love. Instead of giving up, Always seek the silver lining in all situations. This sack assumed immense significance. It was not just a simple bag. It was a parting gift from a mother, a symbol of her love, strength, and a means to stay connected with Ashley, even when they were miles apart. As the sack was passed down through generations, each person who held it felt a connection to Rose and Ashley. They learned about their strength and the hardships they endured. Symbolic strength and identity. As we mentioned, Ashley's sack contained a handful of pecans. Rose chose them for their nutritional value. They could be eaten for sustenance or planted to create new life. Rose wanted them to serve as silent words of encouragement for Ashley's future. Enslaved people had to be inventive in their survival strategies. This was when possessing something as small as pecans held great significance. When food was scarce or used as currency in trade, pecans were useful as they could be saved or traded. They signified wealth and power in a time when both were scarce. They came from trees that grew far off and were deemed exotic. Possibly Rose saved these pecans from her kitchen duties or acquired them through trade. In addition to the pecans, the sack contained a beautiful hand-woven cloth. This cloth served as a clue to the family's story of separation. Throughout history, people have used clothes to express their identity and background. In places like the US, attire was a language by itself. It mirrored social hierarchies, clearly distinguishing those in power from those who were not. Along with factors like skin color, hair texture, and facial features, clothing contributed to the divide. For enslaved individuals, their attire often reflected their inferior status. It was usually coarse and dull, chosen by their owners to emphasize their dominion. Clothing of this nature served as a visible symbol within a broader system devised to keep enslaved people subjugated. Choose your clothes wisely. They can speak volumes about your background and identity. Despite the oppressive system, Rose managed to acquire delicate fabrics and clothing, possibly through long-term relationships with white men or informal markets and pawn shops. She gifted it to her daughter as a farewell gift. The history of Africans in America is brutal, but we have made art out of pain. Tiya Miles. The illusion of charm. Let's pause and talk about the town where Rose and Ashley lived, shall we? Charleston, South Carolina, bears a dark and unforgettable history of slavery. This town was vibrant and affluent but was built on the brutal trade of human lives. Africans were brought here in chains, and their forced labor led to the town's elite's prosperity. The wealth was generated through slave trades and the use of enslaved people on plantations. The town started modestly, but by the 1800s, it had emerged as a significant hub for buying and selling enslaved people. Visitors from other regions were appalled by what they saw in Charleston. They were confounded by the stark contrast between the town's beauty and the ugly truth it harbored, where even children were auctioned off to the highest bidder. In addition to the slave trade, the town maintained control over its enslaved people through stringent laws and severe punishments. There was a building known as the workhouse, a place where enslaved people were sent if they attempted to escape or committed a transgression. Within its walls, these individuals endured punitive measures designed to keep them in line and working without question. Communities can only flourish when they are built on sturdy moral principles and mutual respect. As the city's wealth grew, so did the suffering of its enslaved people. The town's leaders and affluent residents turned a blind eye to the evil they were part of. They deluded themselves into thinking that the enslaved people were content or that they were better off in Charleston than they would be elsewhere. But deep down, they were aware that it was a lie. Charleston had a hard stone known as the auction block, where people's lives were reduced to commodities. Here, the enslaved people were sold to the highest bidder. This is where Ashley was sold. The sale of Ashley on the auction block was a cruel experience for Rose. She had to witness her daughter being sold for a few $100s, a price that can never quantify a life. Did you know? Nearly 40% of enslaved Africans brought to North America arrived through Charleston port in about 1,000 separate cargoes. The road to freedom. Ashley was merely 9 when she was torn from her mother and sold to a new owner, who took her to a cotton plantation far from her birthplace. Life on the plantation was grueling. Ashley had to toil under the scorching sun for long hours in the cotton fields. Despite her tender age, she had to pick cotton like an adult. The work was backbreaking, and the overseers were rigid. They punished any enslaved person who didn't work fast enough or attempted to rest. Ashley missed her mother deeply and would often cry herself to sleep. As Ashley grew, she learned to survive on the plantation. She made friends with other enslaved people, and they supported each other. They shared stories and songs that offered a respite from their troubles. Ashley was particularly adept at sewing, a skill she inherited from her mother. She spent her free time mending clothes for others simply because it brought her joy. Years passed and the Civil War erupted, bringing hope to many enslaved people, including Ashley. They heard whispers about freedom and Abraham Lincoln, the president who sought to abolish slavery. However, the war exacerbated the conditions on the plantation. Food was scarce, and the overseers became more brutal as they feared losing their captives. Finally, the war ended, leading to the abolition of slavery. Ashley was now a young woman free at last. But freedom arrived with its own challenges. She lacked money, a home, or an education. Like many former enslaved people, she had to start her life anew. Embrace new beginnings with courage and vision. They carved the path for a promising future. Ashley chose to stay in South Carolina. She worked as a seamstress, employing the skills her mother had imparted. The work was strenuous and paid very little, but Ashley was grateful for her freedom and her ability to make her own decisions. She always remembered her mother and those she had lost. The journey of the sack began when Rose, a mother facing the threat of separation from her child due to slavery, crafted it for her daughter Ashley. Years later, the sack wound up with Ruth, Ashley's granddaughter. For every person who saw or used the sack, it symbolized a narrative of struggle, love, and resilience. While this story offers numerous lessons, one crucial takeaway is that your acts of kindness and goodwill can reverberate far and wide. As you remember this sack and its story, let it motivate you to uphold the values of love and hope, no matter how difficult life becomes. What you can do: preserve your stories. Encourage older family members to relay their experiences and document them. Potential objections. Objection: this story is too painful and disturbing to discuss, especially with younger generations. Handling: while it's true that this story recounts a harrowing period in history, it's essential to remember and understand the past to build a better future. It can be tailored to be age-appropriate and can serve as a powerful lesson about resilience, love, and the importance of freedom. Objection: it's just a bag. Why attribute so much significance to it? Handling: the bag is not merely an object. It symbolizes the bond between a mother and a child, their shared history, and their legacy of strength and resilience. It's a testament to how love can endure even the most brutal circumstances. Objection: the story focuses too much on the past and doesn't provide solutions for addressing the repercussions of slavery today. Handling: while the story is rooted in the past, it emphasizes the values of resilience, love, and hope, which are timeless and applicable in any era. It's a starting point for broader discussions on how we can address the lingering effects of slavery and strive for justice and equality today.